Chapter 1. The Unforgiving Wilderness. Marcus shielded his eyes from the blistering sun as he surveyed the horizon, a dry and cracked wasteland stretching out in every direction. His breathing was labored, every step heavier than the last, the oppressive heat and exhaustion sapping away the last of his strength. The digital interface on his wrist flickered with diminishing power, the small holographic map blinking out of existence. His suit's limited filtration system barely kept the atmosphere breathable, but without fresh water or food, it wouldn't be long before his body gave out. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the crash. Marcus had been on a reconnaissance mission, exploring uncharted systems for potential colonization sites. His ship, the Pathfinder, had been a small, single-man craft capable of light-speed travel, but it was no match for the unexpected ion storm that had erupted around him. Knocked out of warp, the ship had plummeted through the atmosphere of this nameless planet, colliding with the barren landscape below. The wreckage lay miles behind him, little more than a heap of twisted metal. He'd scavenged what he could, a few emergency rations, a damaged data tablet, and his wrist communicator which, much to his frustration, had no signal. The local wildlife was sparse, and what little he'd seen had been vicious, forcing him to travel in fear for his life. His body ached from walking through endless deserts and jagged cliffs, and he had begun to wonder if he would die here alone. He hadn't seen any signs of intelligent life, only barren rocks and violent storms that ripped through the landscape without warning. The harshness of the planet seemed intent on breaking him. On this day, as he wandered aimlessly, his eyes caught something unusual on the horizon, a shimmering distortion in the air. It wasn't a mirage. This had a shape to it, a purposeful form, like a glint of metal reflecting the sun. He stumbled forward, pushing through the dizziness clouding his vision, desperation igniting the last of his strength. He barely had time to react when a shadow passed over him, the high-pitched hum of an engine cutting through the air. Marcus looked up, his heart pounding. Hovering above him was an alien craft, sleek and predatory in design. It didn't resemble any of the ships used by the Galactic Union or any of the known species Marcus had encountered in his travels. The craft descended, the air around it whipping into a violent storm of dust and sand. Marcus fell to his knees, too weak to shield his face. The last thing he saw before his vision went black was a group of tall, armored figures emerging from the ship, their movements quick and calculated. When Marcus awoke, he was inside the alien vessel, lying on a cold metallic surface. His body felt stiff, but the pain that had consumed him earlier had dulled, as if something had treated his injuries. Blinking against the harsh lights, he tried to sit up, his limbs heavy. The ship's interior was unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were lined with intricate symbols and alien technology, glowing softly in hues of blue and silver. It felt less like a vessel and more like a temple, reverent and foreboding. Standing near him were the figures from earlier 7 of them, each tall, muscular, and clad in armor that was both functional and ornate. Their skin was a deep, coppery hue, and their eyes gleamed with an unsettling predatory intelligence. They were Vicarii, a species known for their prowess in battle and hunting. He'd heard stories of them, rumors among spacefarers that the Vicarii were a merciless people who lived for combat and held strict codes of honor. One of the figures stepped forward, removing their helmet. Marcus' breath caught in his throat. The Vicarii leader, a woman, was fierce and beautiful in equal measure. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, were a molten amber that seemed to glow from within. Her dark, braided hair was adorned with metal rings, and her face bore scars that only enhanced her intimidating presence. "I see you are awake, human," she said, her voice deep and commanding. She didn't speak in a language Marcus understood, but some form of translator embedded in the ship systems allowed him to comprehend her. "You are fortunate we found you when we did. The wilds of this planet would have claimed your life within hours." Marcus struggled to speak, his throat dry. "Thank you for saving me." Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if amused by his gratitude. "We did not save you out of kindness, human. You are an outsider on Vicaria, and in our culture, debts must be repaid." Marcus swallowed hard. He knew little of Vicarii customs, but their reputation was enough to make him wary. "What do you want from me?" The leader tilted her head, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "I am Raquel, huntmaster of this HFY clan. You were found in our territory, and by our law, you now owe a blood debt to me." She stepped closer, towering over Marcus, her presence overwhelming. "You are a weak species, human, but I sense something different in you. A fire. Perhaps you can be of use to us." Marcus' mind raced. He had no idea what use she meant, but he had no choice but to comply. He was trapped, and if the HFY had saved him, they could just as easily end his life. HFY studied him for a moment longer, then turned to one of her subordinates, who handed her a strange device. She held it out to Marcus. "This is a bonding seal," she said. "It will mark you as mine until your debt is repaid. You will serve me and do as I command, or you will die." Marcus hesitated, staring at the device. He didn't understand exactly what was happening, but he knew that if he refused, he wouldn't live to regret it. With a shaky hand, he took the device from her and pressed it against his skin. A sharp, burning pain shot through his arm, and a glowing mark appeared on his wrist, a swirling emblem that pulsed with the same molten light as HFY's eyes. "Good," HFY said with a satisfied smile. "You are now bound to me, human. Welcome to the HFY Hunters." Chapter 2. The Huntmaster's Challenge. Days turned into weeks aboard the HFY vessel, and Marcus was constantly reminded that he was little more than a temporary passenger, bound by a debt that weighed heavily on him. The bond seal on his wrist pulsed faintly whenever HFY entered the room, a reminder of the strange and dangerous connection that now tied them together. Marcus spent most of his time in the lower decks of the ship, where the HFY hunters trained and maintained their weapons. The entire ship was a marvel of alien engineering, a fusion of raw power and elegant design. Everywhere he went, Marcus felt like he was walking through a living beast. Organic curves met cold metal, with veins of energy pulsing through the walls as if the ship itself were alive. The HFY crew, however, did not make his life easy. While they tolerated his presence due to HFY's orders, their disdain for him was clear. They were a proud, warlike people, and to them, Marcus was weak, a lesser being who had survived only by chance. One of the warriors, Krolak, made no effort to hide his disgust. A massive HFY male with broad shoulders and a scar running across his face, Krolak was HFY's second-in-command. He was often the first to sneer at Marcus as they passed in the corridors, and during training sessions, he took particular delight in mocking Marcus' inability to match their physical prowess. "You barely survived out there," Krolak said one day, his voice dripping with contempt as he watched Marcus struggle with a piece of unfamiliar HFY equipment. "If it wasn't for HFY, you'd be feeding the scavengers by now. Maybe it's time you showed a little more respect for the ones keeping you alive." Marcus clenched his jaw but held his tongue. He learned quickly that talking back to a HFY, especially Krolak, would get him nowhere. Instead, he focused on keeping his head down and trying to stay out of the warrior's way. But despite the tension with the crew, there was something about HFY that intrigued him. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, fierce, commanding, and unapologetically dominant. Her presence filled every room she entered, and even among the other HFY, it was clear that she was respected and feared in equal measure. One evening, Marcus was summoned to HFY's quarters. He entered the large, dimly lit room, feeling the familiar pulse of the bond seal as he approached her. HFY stood near the central control table, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes watching him intently. "Do you know why I saved you, human?" she asked, her voice low and thoughtful. Marcus hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I assumed it was because of your people's honor system." HFY smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in her expression. "Yes, we HFY hold honor above all else. But that's not the only reason." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "There is something about you, Marcus. A resilience, a strength that most of your kind lack. I've seen many species break under the conditions you endured, but you survived." Marcus swallowed hard. He didn't feel strong. If anything, he felt like he had barely made it through the ordeal. "I've been watching you," HFY continued, "and I believe you may be more useful than even you realize." Marcus' heart raced as he met her gaze. "What do you want from me?" HFY's smile widened, though it still didn't reach her eyes. "You have proven you can survive. Now I want to see if you can fight." The following morning, Marcus found himself standing in the ship's training arena, surrounded by the Viacarii warriors. Raquel had issued her challenge, and now the crew had gathered to witness the spectacle. Krolak stood opposite Marcus, a wide grin spreading across his face. He flexed his massive arms, his muscles rippling beneath his armor. The arena was a circular chamber with high walls, and the floor was covered in thick, padded mats. The Viacarii had cleared a space in the center for the combat, their eager eyes locked on the two combatants. "You think you can fight me, human?" Krolak taunted, his voice loud and mocking. "This will be over before it even begins." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he didn't stand a chance against Krolak in a fair fight. Viacarii were physically superior in every way. But this wasn't just about winning. This was a test, a way to prove himself in front of Raquel and the crew. If he backed down now, he would never be able to earn their respect. Raquel stood at the edge of the arena, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "You may begin," she said calmly. Krolak wasted no time. With a roar, he charged at Marcus, his fists swinging in wide, brutal arcs. Marcus barely had time to react, ducking and rolling to the side as Krolak's fist smashed into the mat where he had been standing. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He couldn't match Krolak's strength, but maybe he could outmaneuver him. He darted around the arena, trying to stay one step ahead of the Viacarii's powerful blows. But Krolak was faster than Marcus had anticipated. The larger warrior closed the distance between them in a flash, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his shirt and lifting him off the ground with ease. "You're weak, human," Krolak growled, his face inches from Marcus's. "You don't belong here." With a grunt, Krolak hurled Marcus across the arena. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. Pain shot through his ribs as he struggled to stand, gasping for air. The Viacarii warriors laughed and jeered from the sidelines, enjoying the spectacle. Krolak smirked, raising his arms triumphantly as if the fight were already over. But Marcus wasn't finished. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to his feet. His vision swam, but he focused on Krolak, narrowing his eyes. "I'm not done yet," Marcus muttered, wiping blood from his lip. Krolak turned, his smile faltering as he saw Marcus standing again. "You've got guts, I'll give you that, but it won't save you." As Krolak charged again, Marcus realized he had to think differently. Fighting Krolak head-on was suicide. But the Viacarii warriors thrived on aggression and brute force. What if Marcus could use that against him? At the last second, instead of dodging, Marcus dropped to his knees and rolled forward, slipping under Krolak's outstretched arms. As the larger warrior stumbled, Marcus sprang to his feet behind him, grabbing a nearby training staff from the ground. Krolak turned just in time to see Marcus swing the staff, catching him across the face with a loud crack. Krolak staggered, his expression one of surprise and fury. Marcus didn't let up, delivering another blow to Krolak's knee, forcing him to drop to one leg. The arena fell silent as Marcus stood over the fallen Vicarii, panting heavily, the staff in his hands. He wasn't sure how long he could keep this up, but for the moment, he had the upper hand. Raquel's voice cut through the silence. "Enough." Krolak glared up at Marcus, his eyes burning with rage, but he didn't move. Marcus lowered the staff, his hands trembling from the adrenaline. He glanced over at Raquel, unsure of what to expect. The huntmaster nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You have passed the first test, human." Chapter 3. Beneath the Mask. As Marcus stepped back from the battered Krolak, he felt the tremors in his hands begin to subside, though his heart still raced. The arena around him seemed to buzz with the low murmurs of the Vicarii warriors. They had watched a human, one they had mocked and dismissed, stand toe-to-toe with one of their strongest and emerge victorious even if just barely. Krolak's humiliation was evident in the way his massive fists clenched and unclenched, his face a storm of rage. But it wasn't the anger that gave Marcus pause. It was the sudden cold realization that these were beings whose lives revolved around power and dominance. And right now, Marcus had just embarrassed one of their most respected warriors. The tension between Marcus and Krolak hung heavy in the air. For a moment, Marcus wondered if Krolak would lunge at him again, this time with lethal intent, but Raquel's sharp voice interrupted the tension. "Krolak, stand down." Her tone left no room for argument. Slowly, reluctantly, Krolak rose to his feet, his eyes still fixed on Marcus with a smoldering intensity that promised this was far from over. He spat on the floor, glaring at Marcus before turning and walking out of the arena, his pride clearly wounded. Raquel stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Marcus. You surprised us, human. You showed spirit and cunning, qualities that are more valuable than brute strength in a hunt. She looked around at the others. Let this be a lesson. Strength alone does not guarantee victory. The warriors nodded in agreement, but Marcus could feel their gazes on him, some of them filled with newfound respect, others still skeptical. He had proven himself, but it was clear that in their eyes, one victory did not erase the fact that he was still an outsider, a human among warriors. Raquel's gaze softened slightly as she approached him, her imposing figure casting a shadow over him. You have passed the first test, Marcus, she said quietly, the translator in his wrist buzzing to life with her words. But there is more to come. Marcus, still catching his breath, wiped the sweat from his brow. What happens now? Raquel studied him for a moment before gesturing for him to follow. Walk with me. We have much to discuss. As they walked through the ship's dimly lit corridors, Marcus couldn't help but notice the way the Vicarii warriors moved around them, their eyes constantly flicking toward him, filled with curiosity or disdain. Raquel led him to a private chamber at the rear of the ship, a room unlike the others he had seen. It was adorned with intricate carvings and symbols, glowing softly with the same energy that coursed through the ship. The air felt heavier here, charged with significance. This is my personal chamber, Raquel said as the door slid shut behind them. A place where the leader of a Vicarii clan reflects and communes with our ancestors. Marcus looked around, noticing the strange artifacts that lined the walls, ornate weapons, ceremonial armor, and strange symbols etched into stone tablets. The room felt alive, as though it was steeped in centuries of tradition and power. Raquel stood near a circular table in the center of the room, her expression more contemplative now. Do you know why I brought you here? Marcus hesitated. To talk about the test? She shook her head slowly. No, Marcus. The test was just the beginning. You've proven yourself capable of fighting, but now I want to see if you're capable of something far more important. She paused, her amber eyes locking onto his. Leadership. Marcus blinked in surprise. Leadership? I don't understand. Raquel sighed, as if weighing her words carefully. You see, Marcus, the Vicarii are a proud and powerful people, but we are also bound by tradition, sometimes to a fault. Our way of life has been forged in battle, and while that has made us strong, it has also made us rigid. For too long, we have relied solely on brute strength, on our ability to dominate and conquer. But times are changing. The galaxy is changing. She circled the table, her fingers lightly brushing the surface of a holographic map that sprang to life, a map of their region of space. The Vicarii have always believed in the supremacy of our kind. We've looked down on other species, including humans, as weak and insignificant. But we are not blind to the fact that the galaxy is full of surprises. Her eyes flicked up to meet his again. You, Marcus, are one such surprise. Marcus didn't know how to respond. He had always seen himself as an ordinary man, a pilot, an explorer, someone who lived by curiosity rather than conquest. But here, among these warlike aliens, he was being seen as something more. Raquel leaned forward, her gaze intense. What I'm offering you, Marcus, is an opportunity. You've survived, you've fought, and now I want to see if you can lead. My clan needs a new perspective, someone who understands more than just battle strategy. I believe you could be that person. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. You want me to lead your people? Raquel smiled, but there was something calculating in it. Not yet. First, you must prove yourself to the clan. They will not accept an outsider easily, even one who has earned my favor. But if you can show them that you have what it takes to think like a Vicarii, to command respect and inspire loyalty, then perhaps they will see you as more than just a human. Marcus swallowed hard. This was far more than he had ever anticipated. He had thought he was merely repaying a debt, but now it seemed that Raquel had far greater plans for him. He didn't know whether to feel flattered or trapped. And what if I refuse? He asked quietly. Raquel's smile faded slightly, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of something in her eyes, vulnerability, or perhaps even desperation. You could refuse, Marcus. But if you do, you will remain a prisoner here, a servant to the Vicarii until your debt is repaid. Your life will be spent in the service of my people, with no hope of returning to your own. The weight of her words pressed down on him like a physical force. He had no desire to spend the rest of his life as a slave, trapped on an alien vessel with no chance of freedom. But the alternative, leading a group of proud, dangerous warriors who barely tolerated him, seemed just as daunting. Marcus took a deep breath. What do I have to do? Arakel's smile returned, though this time it was tinged with relief. Good. The first step is simple. You will join us on a hunt. A hunt? She nodded. Tomorrow, we will descend to the surface of the planet. There, you will accompany me and my warriors as we track and kill one of the great beasts that roam this land. It is a rite of passage for all Vicarii leaders. If you can survive the hunt and prove your worth, it will be the first step toward earning the clan's respect. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. He had survived the wilderness once, barely, and now he was being asked to return to it not as a victim, but as a predator. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady. Arakel's eyes gleamed with approval. Good. Rest tonight, Marcus. Tomorrow, we hunt. Chapter 4. The Price of Survival. The dawn came harsh and swift on the barren landscape, casting long, dark shadows across the ground as Marcus stood once again at the entrance of the Vicarii ship. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of the planet's unfamiliar flora, and the soft hum of the Vicarii vessel above created a sense of foreboding. Today was the day. The hunt was set to begin, and Marcus knew that everything, his survival, his freedom, his future, hinged on what happened in the next few hours. Beside him stood Arakel, her presence as imposing as ever, a gleaming plasma blade strapped to her back. Her amber eyes scanned the horizon with practiced ease, her face a mask of focus. Around them, the Vicarii warriors prepared themselves in silence, their movements methodical and efficient as they readied their weapons. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the planet itself held its breath for what was to come. We are entering the Gorthas territory, Arakel said, her voice low and steady as she addressed Marcus. You've survived this planet's cruelty once, but now you will face its apex predator. Stay sharp, stay alert, and remember, this hunt is not just about your survival. It is about earning the respect of the Vicarii. Do not fail. Marcus nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He gripped the plasma spear they had given him, feeling its weight settle in his hands. He had trained with it for days now, learning how to fight as the Vicarii did. But the truth was, nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to face. The Gortha was a creature of legend, massive, vicious, and nearly impossible to kill. 6 legs, razor-sharp claws, and a mouth full of jagged teeth that could tear through steel. Its hide was as tough as starship armor, making most weapons useless against it. Only by striking at its vulnerable joints or its exposed underbelly could they hope to bring it down. Stay close to me, Arakel ordered as the hunting party moved out, and follow my lead. The Gortha is cunning. If we are not careful, it will turn this hunt into our graves. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The desolate landscape around them seemed to stretch on forever, a wasteland of jagged rocks, deep ravines, and twisted vegetation. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting harsh light on everything, but the real danger lay in the shadows. Somewhere out there, the Gortha was waiting. The Vicarii moved as one, a tightly coordinated group of warriors with Arakel at the front. Marcus stayed close, his senses heightened by the tension in the air. Every sound, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet, the distant rumble of thunder on the horizon, seemed amplified. His breathing was shallow, his muscles tight with anticipation. After what felt like hours, Arakel signaled for the group to stop. They had reached a deep ravine, its jagged cliffs rising up on either side like the walls of a giant, natural trap. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it a faint, metallic scent. It's here, Arakel said quietly, her eyes scanning the ground. The tracks are fresh. Marcus looked down and saw the massive, clawed footprints embedded in the dirt, leading deeper into the ravine. The Gortha had passed through here recently. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. There was no room for fear now. Arakel motioned for the group to spread out, and the Vicarii hunters moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. They fanned out along the edges of the ravine, their weapons ready, their eyes sharp. Marcus followed Arakel's lead, keeping low as they made their way toward the center of the canyon. Every step felt like a gamble one wrong move, and the beast could be upon them in an instant. The ground beneath them rumbled suddenly, a low, ominous sound that echoed through the canyon. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his ears. The rumbling grew louder, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. "Prepare yourselves," Arakel shouted, drawing her plasma blade. The Gortha emerged from the shadows with a deafening roar, its massive form crashing through the rocks like a force of nature. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he laid eyes on the creature for the first time. It was even larger than he had imagined, easily the size of a starship, its 6 powerful legs carrying it forward with terrifying speed. Its eyes, dark and soulless, locked onto the hunting party, and its jagged maw snapped open, revealing rows of serrated teeth. The Vicarii moved into action immediately. Plasma bolts and energy blades lit up the air as the warriors launched their attack, moving with the grace and precision of seasoned hunters. Arakel led the charge, her plasma blade glowing as she danced around the creature, striking at its legs and joints with deadly accuracy. But the Gortha was no simple prey. It moved with terrifying speed, its massive tail lashing out and sending one of the Vicarii flying into the canyon wall. It swung its head toward Marcus, and for a brief, horrifying moment, he found himself staring into the creature's gaping maw. Instinct kicked in. Marcus rolled to the side, just as the creature's jaws snapped shut where he had been standing. His heart raced as he scrambled to his feet, gripping the plasma spear tightly. He had to stay calm. He had to fight. Arakel's voice cut through the chaos. "It's joints. Aim for the joints." Marcus nodded, his mind racing as he darted toward the creature's hind leg. The plasma spear in his hands hummed with energy as he thrust it forward, aiming for the soft joint between the Gortha's armored scales. The spear connected, and the creature let out a deafening roar of pain, stumbling slightly as its leg buckled. "Now!" Arakel shouted. "Strike now!" The Vicarii warriors converged on the creature, their weapons glowing as they attacked in unison. Plasma bolts seared through the air, and energy blades cut deep into the Gortha's flesh. The beast thrashed wildly, its roars shaking the very ground, but it was weakening. Blood poured from its wounds, and its movements became more sluggish with every passing moment. Marcus saw his opportunity. With a surge of adrenaline, he charged forward, his plasma spear aimed at the creature's exposed underbelly. He drove the spear deep into the Gortha's flesh, and the beast let out one final, guttural roar before collapsing to the ground with a thunderous crash. The canyon fell silent. Marcus stood there, panting, his hands still gripping the spear as the massive creature lay dead before him. The Vicarii warriors gathered around the fallen beast, their eyes filled with respect as they looked at Marcus. For the first time since he had arrived on this planet, he felt like he truly belonged. Arakel approached him, her face unreadable as she studied him. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. "You have proven yourself today, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying a note of pride. "You fought with honor. You have earned the respect of the Vicarii." Marcus nodded, his heart still pounding in his chest. The exhaustion was starting to catch up to him, but there was a sense of accomplishment that overwhelmed the fatigue. He had done it. He had survived the hunt, and more than that, he had earned his place among the Vicarii. Arakel placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm but not unkind. "Your debt is paid, human. You are free to return to your people, if that is what you wish. But know this: if you choose to stay, you will not be a prisoner. You will be one of us." Marcus looked at her, surprised. "One of you?" Arakel nodded. "You have proven yourself worthy. The Vicarii do not take outsiders lightly, but you have earned your place. The choice is yours." Marcus stared out at the horizon, the weight of her words settling over him. He had come to this planet as a lost explorer, desperate and alone. Now, he had a new path laid before him, a path that offered him not only survival but a chance to truly belong. He turned to Arakel, meeting her gaze. "I'll stay." Arakel smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her fierce features. "Then welcome, Marcus. to the Vicarii. And so, Marcus's life changed forever. He had come to this world as a stranded human, but now, he stood as a member of the Vicarii warriors, hunters, and survivors. The galaxy was vast, and his future uncertain, but one thing was clear. He had found his place, and he was ready for whatever came next.